Hi, welcome back to Obsessed by Everything Bravo. My name is Meredith, and I am your host on this journey through the Real Housewives, what I like to refer to as an anthropological study in housewives behavior. And we are going back to the beginning of the Real Housewives franchise and watching with a modern day lens. My name's Meredith. I think I said that. So today we're going to be talking about, sadly, for me, the reunion of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills season 2. Now it's sad because I have really enjoyed them. It's just really taken me back. And even though this season was dark, I think it was so necessary. And I was really thinking deeply about we're doing the reunions this week. I think it's in the second reunion, like the end of the second reunion, or reunion part 2, excuse me, where we start to get into Taylor and her stuff. And she starts apologizing to her cast members, the crew, the fans. I don't know who she was apologizing to. And she was just trying to explain it. And in my mind, I was like, oh, baby, you don't have to explain it. And then I was like, it made me stop and think, like, do I feel like she doesn't have to explain this in 2026 because she did explain this in 2012? Do you know what I mean? Like, am I feeling this way about Taylor, immediately believing her? Well, I mean, it's because I know it to be true, but it doesn't matter. Am I feeling this way about Taylor now because of the way that I was feeling about Taylor in 2011, 2012, which is probably very similar to how the women were feeling. Also because it's like, well, they're going to know more than I am. You know what I mean? And I just have to never forget that that's the whole point. The whole point of this podcast, of my thoughts, of me saying that the housewives are important is because we've really never seen abuse in this manner before. We only ever saw it as this, as maybe a woman of the night. I don't know, a sex worker who was being beaten, right? You see that a lot. You see it as, or someone who was maybe an addict that was being beaten and she was accepting it because that's how she got drugs or whatever it was. You know what I'm saying? Like that, I feel like that stereotype was portrayed. But when that stereotype was portrayed, you never saw them being a daughter, a mother, someone who, kept the house, someone who, whatever, had to go to work. Like these people still have to work, right? I mean, sex work is the work, right? But you never saw you never saw 360 degrees is what I'm saying. You just saw this one little facet. Or it would be like a housewife that would, not a real housewife, but like a regular housewife. Now I have to distinguish between the two. Or, somebody who was, being beaten by their husband and they were just like this meek little woman. You never saw it as someone like Taylor, who was beautiful, wealthy. Now the wealth came from the husband, but whatever. Somebody who you wouldn't expect because, in your mind you would say, well, if you have access to wealth, then you have access to getting yourself out, right? Who had a career, who was on television, a celebrity, who had friends that would be there for her and still kept going back, still kept putting herself in harm's way because people didn't understand the cycle of abuse, right? And that there are good parts as well as the terrible parts, right? Nobody understood that. If you didn't live through that or have someone live through that or work in that space, you didn't understand that there was multiple parts to that. And that's what I'm saying is this is why Housewives is important, because we do get a 360 view. We can understand that she's not just a battered wife. She is battered, but she's also all these 100 other things. And we're finally getting to see that. And I think the women do discuss that a little bit. I think, they come around because I think a lot of them were very hesitant And even in the finale, Kyle even says, you just aren't what I pictured when I think about someone being abused. And it's like, yeah, that's the whole point. So I just there's so often when I talk about housewives with people who don't understand housewives, I get so much pushback. Ugh, how could you watch? This isn't Bad Girls Club. You know what I mean? This is the Real Housewives, and it's important. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not just eye candy, and it is eye candy, and it's I feel like I made this point in DC, and it's like it's not just frivolous. It is frivolous, but it's not just frivolous. It's important. It's important for us to be able to talk about these issues, put them on camera, let the general public know, one, you're not alone. Two, hey, other people live like this. That helps us create a better society. So it's just kind of like, you know, all the stuff that's going on in America right now. And I know I have a lot of international listeners. I have a lot of listeners from Minnesota, actually. When I look, I don't know who listens. I only know locations. Okay. I only know locations of downloads. And that's probably like where you're registered. So you might not even live there now. But, the thing about it is like people are like, oh, conservatives, liberals, whatever, and they're like, oh, you go to college and you become liberal. They're liberal indoctrination. That's not why people become liberal in college. It's because they get out of their little small circle. They meet people who are not like them. Even if you're the same religion, you look the same, et cetera, it's still like you live a different way. And you start to realize, oh, other people live a different life than me. And also you do meet people of other religions, of other cultures, of other races, et cetera, et cetera. And you start to realize, oh, well, I never met XYZ before, and they're really cool. I like them. So maybe all these preconceived notions I had in my head were wrong about this whole, maybe all these stereotypes I had in my head about this religion or this race were totally wrong. Let me reframe that. And then they start to say, maybe everything I thought was totally wrong. Let me search this out for myself. And I think, so that is how you go to college to become liberal, but I feel like that is how everything works. And seeing this stuff, even it's on my TV, I'm not experiencing it, but it's like, oh, it's going to reframe this in my brain. It's like, oh, well, even though they're wealthy and they're beautiful and they're famous, they still have the same problems that I have in my life. That makes it relatable. That makes me not feel alone. That makes it seem like that we're all the same, and makes me realize that across the board, everybody's just people. You know what I'm saying? So while it's not that deep, it is that deep. It is that deep. And I feel like people who don't appreciate the Housewives just don't get it. They just don't get it. And that's okay, because you can not like something. Like, I'm not saying that everybody has to like the Housewives. You don't have to like the Housewives. If you don't like the Housewives, that's fine. But what I'm saying is, if you don't like the Housewives, I don't want to like you. And you probably aren't listening to this if you don't like I doubt there's anyone listening to this that says, I don't like the Housewives. But that's just my PSA for the week about why Housewives are important. And I'm never going to stop talking about it. But also, it just, when I say things like I really enjoyed this season, even though it was incredibly dark and incredibly scary and had real life consequences for multiple people, it's important. It's important that this was out there, because it really changed the paradigm. There was a paradigm shift, I think, for a lot of people after we realized that if this can happen to Taylor, this can happen to anybody. Okay, so let's get into the reunion. Now, the last episode was kind of long, so I didn't talk a lot about, my hair's a mess, the sort of like the finale, but we're going to get into all that now with these three reunion episodes. Obviously, there's plenty to talk about. So this is reunion part 1. It's episode 21. This was at the end of January in 2012. So we bumped up to 2012. That's where we are in the timeline. Now, in reality time, this was, fall of 2011. Was late fall, probably, maybe early December. I don't know how long it takes to edit a reunion, but so that's where we are in reality. But this was released in 2012. So we have made it. I mean, we started in 2006 and it's only been a year. And we will have to slow down the pace as this goes on because we start adding more shows. I mean, we're talking about Shaw's of Sunset. We've got, Atlanta, whatever. We start adding all the Below Deck. Now, Below Deck is interesting because I've never watched that. So we'll be watching that for the first time together. But everybody loves it. And it's if you want your husband or boyfriend in Bravo, most people say Below Deck is that way you get them in. I say, I just start them off with Real Housewives. Why? But also Summer House is good and Southern Charm, Vanderpump Rules, and now currently all the spinoffs of all these shows because there's like 47 types of Below Deck. Not really. I think there's like 5. But we'll be talking about all that, but the timeline is going to slow down. So we're not covering 6 years in 1 year anymore. There's just so much. Even now there's so much that's on Bravo right now. I can barely keep up with it. Okay. So one thing I want to say is Kim is not here. We found out at the end of the last episode that she has checked herself into a rehab program. So she's not filming any of this. She does get her own segment at the last episode. So how it works is on the couches right now, we have Camille at the end, Lisa Vanderpump in the hot seat, Andy, Kyle in the other hot seat, Taylor, and then Adrian at the end. So weirdly, even though I feel like this entire season was about Taylor's not in the hot seat. It's Lisa Vanderpump and Kyle. And if you're wondering why, out of all these women, Lisa Vanderpump and Kyle are still around, this is it. They have the it factor that you cannot buy, you cannot get surgically implanted. They have staying power, they are important. That is it. Okay, so Andy opens out asking Kyle how Kim is doing. She's doing well, but Kyle doesn't want to answer any questions about what's going on. She doesn't want to speak for her sister. She wants Kim to be able to speak for herself. And then Andy asked what the other ladies' reactions are hearing that Kim went to rehab. Lisa says, well, I think we were all aware filming the season something was off, but we didn't know what it was. But she wouldn't have gone if she didn't need to be there. And Adrian says, I think it takes a lot of courage and it's a step in the right direction. Okay, cool. Glad that Kim got help. Again, and I will say, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I had someone say to me recently, oh, I wish Kim Richards would come back to Housewives. And I was like, I actually don't want her to come back to Housewives. I think it's a toxic place to be for an addict. And I think that she lives a much healthier life outside of the spotlight. That's just my personal opinion. And I want her to be healthy and live a long life and be happy with her grandchildren. I don't want her on Housewives if it's going to make her ill. You know what I'm saying? So now Andy says that he wants to get to the questions because they've gotten a record number of emails. And also, I'm pretty sure this is the first 3 episode reunion. I don't know. I can't keep up with this. I do know in 2 years, Atlanta will have a 4 episode reunion, which is oh God, that's too much. But that's just because that was how good the season was. And now 3 episode reunions are kind of the standard. If they have a 2 episode reunion, the season was shit. Because 3 episodes are pretty much standard, but this is the first one. So someone asked and anytime that Andy asks an audience question, it's always going to be Meredith from Louisville asked. And by the way, at this time of my life, I was forever sending in questions. And I'm patiently waiting on the reunion to see if my name is mentioned. Never was one of my questions used, but even though I was submitting multiple questions every year, and even now sometimes they'll still do it. They'll be like, on their social media, they'll be like, if anybody has any questions for the blah blah blah. I feel like that's past. They probably just pull comments from things, but yeah, you could for a time send in questions, but whenever I'm just gonna refer to the audience as the audience or someone. Okay, I cannot bother to write down the name and the location. So if if you submitted a question that got read and I'm missing it, that's okay. Just let me know. obsessedbybravo@gmail.com. So someone asked if Adrienne puts soap on other foods, and Adrienne just like, well, now you know why I don't cook. And she says, I would put soap on a vegetable. I would put soap on that. And she's like, yeah, they make vegetable soap. So another question is, at the white party, Brandy revealed that she made out with Camille on the Vegas trip. What was the dirt? And Camille's like, no, we didn't make out. We danced. She did put her hands on my butt. So then someone says, Lisa, comparing your body shape to last season, your backside has gotten very bootylicious. Have you had work done? Again, why is Andy asking these women if they've had work done? That makes me cringe so much. She says, no, I don't think it's changed. I'm wearing tighter dresses. And Taylor goes, some people pay a lot of money to look like that. Annoying. Okay, so now we're going to get into the meat of it. And I find it very interesting that we start off, which you would think that you wouldn't want to start off with something that you have the most to talk about. Because it's like they'll start off with something big and then they just like have these little chunks like later in the episode because there's more commercial breaks, right? Why they start off with Lisa Vanderpump, because I feel like I just said in the last episode, Lisa Vanderpump really didn't have much of a storyline. So I find it very interesting that they're starting off with her in this whole weird energy between her and Adrienne. And I feel like Adrienne got dog walked on this reunion, but let's get into it. So, Andy opens earlier this season. Lisa was hired to provide commentary on the royal wedding, but as the season went on and Lisa was planning her own daughter's wedding, all of us were left speechless. So we have the Lisa segment. Was it $1 million wedding? Lisa says, absolutely not. I would never spend $1 million. So then Andy keeps asking amounts. He's like, 500K? No, I'm not telling you, but it wasn't $1 million and it was everything she ever dreamed of. So then they asked about Kevin Lee, which was the wedding planner who was like, Beverly Hills, she. Everybody loved Kevin Lee, by the way. Kevin Lee is still an icon, like just he's beloved in Beverly Hills circles, and he does pop up here and there at like events and stuff. It's probably still now. We could probably still see him at a SUR event or something. So they're kind of asking about him, and she was like, well, he got a percentage of what we spent. And, so of course he was trying to make everything more expensive. And Andy was like, well, was it what Pandora wanted or what you wanted? And Lisa's like, Andy, stop trying to create drama. We've already got enough going on here. So then he's like, I have to ask about the tiara. The mother of the bride wearing a tiara. When she came out, did you guys think, oh my God? So he's asking the other ladies. And Kyle is, of course, trying to be as loyal to Lisa as she can. So I think it suits her because, everything was over the top at the wedding. And Adrienne says, I wasn't caught off guard. Once a princess, always a princess, right? And so Lisa gives her a look like, shut up. So that is a nice little segue into us talking about this issue with them. Andy says, for the past 5 years, Adrienne and Lisa have been neighbors, but this season, these two were not always so neighborly. So then they have like a clip package of the tit for tat going on. And then whenever they do a clip package, they always have like this inset of the women faces, and they'll just like show them reacting to the clips that they're using. And like the whole time Kyle is very nervous, like her eyes are darting back and forth because remember, these women are equidistantly away from her, so she's just like looking back and forth at them, and it's very obvious that she's like feels like she's in the middle. And I feel like throughout this whole season, especially because like everybody was like so anti Lisa Vanderpump, it's very obvious that Kyle felt pulled in the middle of this all of this because she's Lisa Vanderpump's friend, but what she should have done is just stayed loyal to Lisa Vanderpump. It would have served her a lot better than going with the other women. But Kyle is, and I've said before and I'll say again, I do like Kyle. I am a Kyle fan. You can never make me hate Kyle. Even like what she's doing now, I'm just kind of like, yeah, still on Kyle's side. Like you can never make me hate her. I do feel like she makes mistakes, and I mean, hello, she's a human being just like the rest of us. I feel like though she should have stayed on Lisa Vanderpump's side. She would have been better served to do that, but she doesn't. And it's going to bite her in the ass in the end, but that's going to be years from now, so don't worry about that. So so Andy says, Kyle, in your blog, the case of Lisa and Adrian is that there's more than meets the eye. What did you mean by that? And she's like, like, why are you asking me? Why don't you ask them? Like, she's like, I think there was tension between them. So Adrian says, I think the remarks that were made that might have been misconstrued, and maybe I thought that they were hurtful. So Andy is like, well, what remarks? And she says, she called my dog a crockpot, and that wasn't nice. So Lisa's like, oh, was this on Twitter? Yeah, they started saying Team Jiggy, Team Jackpot. And I said, oh, crackpot, don't look for something that isn't there. So first of all, Adrian is mad that Lisa called her dog a crockpot. Something so stupid to be mad over. And it's not even on the show. It's on Twitter. So it's like, they came back for season 2 and, Adrian is all upset at Lisa. She's just like, kind of being cold to her and then allowing her staff member to talk shit about her all season long. And he wouldn't talk shit about Lisa if it wasn't okay for him to talk shit about Lisa on camera. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it was obviously okay with Adrian and her household for him to do that. But it was like they came back this season and it's like nobody understood why. Like, why? And it's because Lisa called her dog crackpot. Please. And then, so Adrian's like, that's not nice. It wasn't nice. That's like my child. No, it's your dog. I mean, I get it. Like, people calling your dog names, but please. And then Andy goes, I want to talk about Pandora's bachelorette party. A viewer asked if it bothered Adrian because it was at a competing casino or that she didn't bother to tell you ahead of time. I mean, look, we all know the real answer. The real answer is that Adrian wanted her casino to get publicity, and that's exactly why she just planned a trip with other girls during that same time, because she wanted to show off her casino so that she could make money. That's the real reason. But Adrian says that she didn't bother to tell me ahead of time. No, even if I had like hosted a lunch, I would have loved to do that. And when I heard from someone else that was happening, of course it was going to hurt my feelings. And Lisa goes, I didn't have anything to do with Pandora's bachelorette party. And Adrian says, I find that difficult to believe because you planned half her wedding. And then Lisa just goes, Pandy didn't want to do it at the Palms. She wanted to do it at Planet Hollywood, which that should be the end of the conversation right there instead of all this other stuff. She didn't want to do it at the Palms. And also they offered to host, whoever the Planet Hollywood owner that they know offered to host it for free. Jason's party was there. Adrian didn't give a shit about that. So why are we all of a sudden caring about Pandora's? Well, we know why, babe. We know why. I love that. She's like, she didn't want to do it at the Palms. So there's really no coming back from that. So because Pandora isn't there to speak for herself, and Adrian is classy, somewhat. I mean, mostly. She's not gonna talk shit about Pandora, is what I'm saying. So it's just kind of like you have to leave it at that. So then Andy says, Adrian, in your blog, you said you were disappointed to hear Lisa's snide remarks and classless comments. I can't talk. What comments? And Adrian was like, well, the maloof hoof. And the reason I say that is because when you've worked hard to get where you are in my business, if I called Villa Blanca Villa Caca, I mean, would you really like that? I don't know. Like, I know she had been thinking about that for like a really long time. Like, she played it off to be like, oh, I just thought of that. But I know that was in her back pocket. Like, she was like, I can't wait to call Villa Blanca Villa Caca. And it's also like, you worked hard in your business, baby. You were given this business. Like, you didn't build it from the ground up. And also, what was your dad like? Was he some kind of criminal? Because I feel like the building of Las Vegas, well, there was like a lot of shady shit going on. So what do you mean that you worked so hard? You worked really hard for your maloof hoofs. You mean the one shoe that you had? Give me a break. And Lisa says, yeah, it was just a play on words. Something cute. I'm sorry, but it was just a joke. And Adrian's like, it's not a joke. What if I started making fun of Villa Blanca or Sir? And Lisa says, but it's cute. Vanderpump. And then Camille pipes in and she was like, I thought it was a mean comment. I didn't think it was funny. Just the maloof hoof. Because, hoof is not a nice connotation. So Camille's talking sense. And Andy says, have you seen the Vanderpump? To Adrian. Adrian's like, no, not unless she's wearing it now. And it's like, there is no Vanderpump. there is no Vanderpump. She was making a joke. She's not doing a competing shoe. She's never come out with a Vanderpump shoe. She's not ever done anything in shoes at all, as far as I know. Now, if you have some different information, contact me. There's a link right in the show description where you can send me a message or leave a comment. Even I don't actually see the comments that often. But if you have a comment or a rating and review, I'd love a rating and review. You can talk about the Vanderpump if you want to. So Adrian's like, no, unless she's wearing it now. And then Andy's like, well, are you wearing your shoe? And yes, she's wearing her one shoe, the only shoe that we've seen, and is a beautiful shoe. It's sparkly. I mean, to die for. And Lisa's like, yes, I love those shoes 100%. And then Camille's like, pump sounds nicer than hoof. And then Lisa goes, I like hoof. It's a little fat shoe. And everyone's like, yes, that's the point. That's terrible. Who wants to wear a little fat shoe? And they're all jumping in. And Adrian's like kicking her foot out. And she's like, I don't think you can call this a little fat shoe. And Lisa's like, I already told you. I love the shoe. I want the pink one. And then Adrian's like, well, it's not pink. It's nude. And so Lisa's like, okay, nude then. And then they go to commercial break. It's so funny. And so Andy continues, like, we're still on this trajectory. He's like, Lisa, you say a lot of digs you think are funny. And she goes, fine, I won't anymore. I don't know why. This shit is so funny, but it's just like another example of someone being a fan favorite because they're just funny in their confessionals. And yes, are they funny at the expense of the other women? Yes, but that's just part of it. And it's not like I'm never going to think badly about another woman, one of the other cast members, because of a funny quip that someone says in a confessional. I'm just not. I just don't think that it's just funny. Bethany does it. Nene does it. Lisa Vanderpump does it. And these are the three top housewives, especially at this time. You think about Tamra, someone like Tamra, who one is a bully, first of all. She's trying to do this, but Tamra's not as funny, right? And so when she does it, she comes off as mean, even though she's trying to do this. But she's trying to be mean and trying to do digs. And I'm not saying that like Lisa isn't trying to get a little dig in here or there. And I'm pretty sure that she kind of admits that she does it, especially after she started to see the season and like to see Bernie talking shit about her. And she was like, yeah, I'm going to call it a maloof hoof. Guess what? You know what I mean? You're going to throw digs at me. I'm going to throw digs right back. But she's not really doing it from a place of like malicious intent. It's just like something to be funny. Bethany the same way. It's like she's not trying to be malicious. She's just trying to say it how she sees it, and she says it in like a funny way, right? And the audience really resonates with that. So people like Bethany, Nene, Lisa Vanderpump. The audience likes them because they're funny, they're enjoyable, they're not being mean and malicious, and the other women just cannot take it. And the thing about it is whenever I think of Adrienne Maloof, I think of the Maloof hoof. Why? Because she got mad about it. If she had just never once more mentioned the Maloof hoof, never mentioned it, it would have just been one of those things that just happened and we don't talk about it anymore. But because she talks about the Maloof hoof, I swear to God, last season, every time I said Adrienne Maloof, in my mind, I was thinking Maloof hoof. I never even once thought about the Vanderpump, even though that was like the second thing to it. But I will forever connect Adrienne Maloof with the Maloof hoof because she got upset about it. Just let it go. Jeez. Okay. So Andy laughs and he's like, I get this sense that there are other things that Lisa has said that bothers other of you. And Kyle says, I think her humor is condescending. Like when I did the splits at Pandora's party, you laughed about it. And Lisa says, I said, why would you do the splits on the table when we're saving it for the wedding? I didn't put you down. And Kyle said, but then you went on to say some other things like I was doing it for attention. And that's the kind of stuff people get upset about. Lisa says, so when you're saying that I prey on the weak, you didn't think that was hurtful to me? And Kyle goes, what you said about the splits was in retaliation of that. Once I said that, we were fine. Once I did that, we were like, when in the moment when I did that, we were fine and laughing. And then you saw the episode where I said to Taylor, maybe Lisa preys on the weak. And then you said, well, Kyle did that because she's desperate for attention. That's who Kyle is. But you would never say that to my face. You said that to retaliate. Be honest. And the reason I said that to that, what was about Taylor, not about you. That's why I said maybe. I was having a conversation with Taylor, who I knew was being abused by Russell, who didn't have the courage or the strength to speak up to him or anybody else in her life for that matter. So when she came to me and said she felt intimidated by you, I said, why, I've never felt like that. With Lisa, however, I'm a very strong person. So I said, maybe she preys on weak people. So you need to learn to speak up for yourself. But that's not what was mean that but that's not was being I wasn't being mean to you. You and I are good friends, and I think that in order to be good friends with you, you have to be a strong person. I don't mean that you prey on weak people. I think you're a good person. I didn't mean it to come out like that. It was more about Taylor. Okay, so that was like a monologue. But essentially, Kyle's mad that Lisa said she does the things for attention, which she does. And she thinks that Lisa said that in retaliation to Kyle saying that Lisa preys on weak people. I'd love to know just like the timeline. Like they're doing their confessionals well into when the season airs. Like that seems crazy. Or, oh, you know what? Actually, I'm just kidding. That wasn't in a confessional. Kyle's saying that she said that in an interview somewhere. Okay, so that makes sense. But it's just like the timeline is still weird. So Kyle is saying that Lisa talks shit about her as a response to her saying that Lisa preys on weak people. Well, yeah, I mean, that was bad. I mean, I clocked that when she said it. To be honest with you, it's true. But she doesn't go after weak people. She actually collects them. She collects them in her little army because she just can. But I found that interesting that Kyle said that. But Kyle's trying to say it wasn't about Lisa. It was about Taylor. Like she shouldn't feel intimidated by Lisa. And, you know, like she was trying to get her to be strong. That's not how she meant that. That's how she's saying that now. But that's not how that came out. I'm sorry. It is what it is. Taylor says, once I finally confronted Lisa and was able to get like everything off my chest, that even though I may be a weaker person and now she's been there for me, even though she's going through a weak spot in her life, you just have to be really forthcoming and then everything works well. So Taylor, she she's trying to advocate for Lisa, and she's just kind of proving her own point. She's like, well, once I was able to stand up to her and tell her how I really feel, then we were friends. It's like, you're literally proving the point. So Kyle is like, also know that our feelings get hurt. My feelings were hurt by comments that you made. And Lisa said, I'm sorry for saying you want attention, and I'm sorry for saying the Maloof, whatever. I won't say that again. And Adrienne goes, well, you can say it. You've already said it several times. We're going back to the Maloof. Lisa says, well, why shouldn't I be able to apologize? And so we just need to clock this, because this specifically has repercussions till the end of time. Kyle says, it's the way you're doing it. We're all very good friends, and I will say that being in a friendship with you is like playing chess with Bobby Fischer. Every move is calculated. Lisa goes, thanks, Kyle. And Kyle's like, it's the truth. What you're doing right now is calculated to me. So Andy says, being friends with her is like playing chess with Bobby Fischer. And Kyle's like, yeah, Lisa's a very intelligent person. She's very bright. And Andy asks, are you saying she's manipulative? Kyle says, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm nervous, to be honest, because I know now that Lisa's going to be angry with me. And Lisa goes, I'm scared of you too. Your temper as well. I don't want to get on the wrong side of you either. So then Kyle goes, you know, people have said things against me about who I really am this season. So Kyle is referring to the game night, and people were definitely calling her a mean girl. We'll talk about that later. And so she's like, basically like, you're saying that because you know people have said shit about me this season, but that's not who I am. You know me. And Lisa's like, well, what do you mean? And so Kyle says, you know, the stuff that I've said. After game night, people were saying I was a mean or a bad person. And then Lisa goes, well, game night was mean-spirited. And Kyle's like, yes, Lisa, you know that's been upsetting and hurting me, so you just said it on purpose. This is what's very difficult about doing stuff like this. A lot of people assumed, oh, this one hates this one, or maybe me and Camille, because we had issues last year, that we don't like each other. But I can honestly say that I really care about everyone in this room and that we're friends, but we have our moments. And Lisa says, but that's life. You put 6 people on a journey and you're going to have disagreements. Of course you are. Okay, so that seems like it got squashed very easily, but I cannot stress how important it was that Kyle, first of all, is calling Lisa Vanderpump out, saying being friends with you is like being Bobby Fischer. And what she's saying is everything that you do is calculated, and you manipulate the situation to make yourself look better. That's literally what Taylor was saying in the middle of the season, but nobody else would stick up for it. And Kyle didn't want to get in the middle of it, and she didn't want her name to be out there, right? So she wasn't saying anything. But that's basically what Taylor was saying, is like Lisa's manipulative, and, you know, she's got an ego. And here's the thing. All of that is true. The problem is, and I can tell you now, I actually don't care, because it's seamless. The problem is now. So what's going to happen now and in the future until they are finally able to succeed is Kyle. Well, there's going to be these 2 factions, and then they're going to be frenemies. Kyle and Lisa are still trying to maintain a friendship. It's very, very, very similar to Bethany and Jill, right? Except for Kyle and Lisa were both favorites, right? So now they have these factions, and Kyle, she rallies around with the popular girls, okay? Or whatever is going to be the popular girl. Lisa, she likes to pick up the weaker ones and put them in her pocket. And they're always going to have these factions. And then in the future, we'll have something called the Fox Force 5. I don't want to talk about it too much now, but that's when you have very strong, popular, mean girls. One of them is Lisa Rinna. This is how and they're always trying to go after Lisa Vanderpump. Always trying to go after Lisa Vanderpump. Always, always, always. Even so much so is like her taglines are about it. Like she's like, you know, you can't steal my crown and all these things. Like they're always trying to go after her. And they simply cannot take her down. She just cannot. And when she finally decides to leave, I think she leaves like mid-season of a um she just gets tired of it. She still at this point is a producer of Vanderpump Rules and it's on that show and it's still going strong. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they literally cannot take her down ever. She's still a fan favorite. Now, I will say Lisa has done some things on Vanderpump Rules that I don't agree with. She's very like male centered in that show. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But as far as Housewives, Housewives is Housewives. That's like a different conversation. She's the queen. They can never take her down. But I don't know. I just really feel like we need to make sure to emphasize this is what is going on. Now, one thing I will say is I never, until years later, like years later, after Vanderpump had already left, I never really got that she was manipulating. Hold on just a second. Oh, I'm getting a spam risk phone call. I never really understood that she was manipulating the whole thing. I just kind of thought, it is what it is. Now I can see it. Now I have a clearer lens. And really, it's mostly because other women in other franchises are trying to do it, but they're clumsy. She's doing it and she's flawless. And that's why I never saw it, right? Because she's doing it behind the scenes. And there'll be little things here and there. But we'll see if we can pick up on it. But other women are doing it now. And you can tell it's there. It's written all over their face. They do it on camera. It's just open in the air. It's clumsy. It's ugly, and it's funny. But yeah, back then I couldn't believe it. I was like, no, because she's masterful at it. And honestly, we should all take notes. All right, and I think that's so funny because this is like the first half of the first episode. We're just talking about how everyone can't stand Lisa Vanderpump. And it's really just like jealousy. Like jealousy is a disease. Get well soon. Okay, so let us move on. And so Andy says, because really, what more can we talk about this? Because she doesn't do things on camera. She just says these little snide comments about them. And they're all pissed about it. But they can't prove anything because nothing's on camera because she's smart. And what I mean by that is like, what she's doing, I don't know if it's clear, but she's making herself look good on camera and she's making all the other women look terrible. Like, for instance, once her and Taylor had it out, suddenly she was Taylor's biggest champion. No matter what. Like, oh, I don't think Russell wrote those emails. I don't think Taylor knew about those emails that Russell wrote. Remember, he wrote those emails about me or to me, and she didn't know about them, even though she did. And just little things like this the whole time. Like always calling Camille, always being there for Camille. Just making herself look the best. Well, for instance, with the stuff with Adrian, Lisa played that perfect because Adrian really looks like an asshole, and we can move on. We talk about this a little bit more here in a few minutes, but Adrian looks like a dick the entire season. Now, I will say for a lot of the really explosive stuff, Lisa wasn't there. Like Lisa didn't go to game night and Lisa wasn't at the Malibu party. And this is when some of the really explosive things happened. And for me, the Malibu party was when I really turned on Adrian because I just did not like the way that she was like manhandling all the women. Like, unless Taylor is getting ready to do something dangerous, you do not need to put your hands on her. Like, okay, she's going to say something. Okay, who cares? She's already said some of the most outrageous things on the planet. Like, what could be worse, really? She's making herself look like an asshole. You can't stop it. Or not an asshole. She was looking crazy. And I just really turned on Adrian. That's messy. She was being messy. And all the stuff that was going on between her and Lisa Vanderpump, like it looked so dumb when they're at Kennedy's birthday party and she's all of a sudden turns to Kyle and she's like, and you know what I'm mad at? I'm mad that Lisa's having Pandora's birthday party, not at my casino. And you can see the look on Kyle's face. She was like, are you fucking serious? Because she knew it was so ridiculous. But then we had to have like a multi episode arc about this. And it was just stupid. She just made herself look like an asshole. Like she was mad at Lisa Vanderpump for not talking about the Palms or not taking her daughter to the Palms. When did that even, like, she probably found out about it when she saw the call sheets that they were filming. But what if they didn't film? What if they weren't filming Pandora's bachelorette party? Would she care then? No, she wouldn't give a shit. That's because, and it makes her look money hungry, or, you know, it just makes her look bad. Okay. So that's what I mean. It's like, but Lisa is behind the scenes, befriending Camille, befriending Taylor, doing these nice things for people, making herself look like this funny victim to, you know, Adrian and her chef, and Kyle saying all these mean things, and everybody saying these mean things about her. And she just gets to sit back and be like, me? How could you say that about me? I've only ever been kind, you know, like whatever she does. So that's where this goes, is like, she's just playing it so well. And it's like somebody like Brandy, who could have had that kind of an arc, like at game night. If she had just stuck to the tears and not been like, bitch, I'm going to kill you and you're doing crystal meth, she could have had like a beautiful arc. She played it wrong, right? And because she's not everybody is as masterful at this as Lisa Vanderpump. Okay, so gosh, this episode is getting long. So Andy says, I want to take a bit of a turn from camels and mermaids to $25,000 sunglasses to edible gold dust. This season proves that there's bling and there's Beverly Hills bling. So then we have a montage of all the money and whatever, everything expensive. He asks about Adrian's spa, and she says that with all the different machines, it costs a couple $100,000. That's crazy. And what's even crazy, I mean, I know nobody can walk into their house and just like walk out with like a CO2 laser machine, but I would be nervous about putting my home out there with all this expensive stuff in it. Like, you're just asking for a robbery. So there was a question, how were Camille's houses and the nannies divided in the divorce? And Camille says that we're still working on it. Andy asked, did you sell the Colorado house? No, but they sold the Hamptons house. Did you sell the Hawaii house? No. And I was just there. And then he asked, what is the most expensive dress any of you own? Lisa says that she has a Valentino that she almost mortgaged her house for. It was $30,000. Everyone else says their most expensive dress is like $6,000 to $8,000, which is like, that's a car, you know. The $30,000 is my car that I'm paying for. $25,000 for sunglasses sickens me. Are any of the women ever offended by the excess around them? And Lisa says, well, I think that feelings have changed in the last few years. Basically talking about the recession. Sorry, words are hard. And she's like, I don't know anybody that would spend $25,000 on sunglasses. But even if I did, you know, like nobody would, I wouldn't tell anyone. Oh, and Kyle says, yeah, I know a lot of people who have a lot of money and none of them would spend $25,000 on sunglasses. And then Andy says, well, it seems like there's a lot of rules in Beverly Hills. Is it a rule that no matter how much you spend, you don't discuss what you spend? Lisa's like, never. I was raised, you aren't supposed to talk about money ever. And then Adrian says, well, in Beverly Hills, people do it because it's mostly new money. The other thing is, like, on Beverly Hills Housewives, they do it because the audience is curious. Like, they put the prices of everything on the little chyron, and they do that for our benefit. It's not like the women are talking about it. Like, really, the only person who ever mentioned money for anything was Dana Wilkie. And then, you know, like, for instance, Kennedy's birthday party last year, she wasn't saying how much stuff was. Like, when she went and bought all those little Barbie necklaces, she wasn't saying what it costs. Like, you know, it could cost $20, but it, you know, of course it was thousands of dollars, but she wasn't saying that. It was the producer, the editors were putting that in. So you can't really fault fault the women for that. Really, it was just Dana Wilkie being like, this is $25,000. And again, there's a new housewife. I know I've already talked about this, but she's doing the same thing. She's literally, everybody is just like, that's Dana Wilkie. Okay. So now we start to talk a little bit about Taylor. Andy says, Taylor, words can't describe everything you've been through this season. We got so many emails for you, and many like this one that said, Taylor, my heart went out to you when I heard of your husband's suicide. I wish you and Kennedy healing, strength, and peace. So he says, how are you doing and how is Kennedy? And Taylor says, it's a day-by-day thing. Not all days are good. I have so many flashbacks in my mind that I wish I could somehow stop the flashbacks, I think, but it's all part of the process. And we have a wonderful therapist that you see on the show. She's talking about Dr. Sophie. And she says, I'm so thankful he checks on us every day. And then they ask about his DO. I'm pretty sure I already explained that. It's just not a MD. It's just a different type of schooling. They're still doctors. And Andy said, it's been about 6 months since this happened. And ladies, when you got the news that Russell had committed suicide, what was your first reaction? Lisa says, shock. And Kyle says, I thought it was a lie. Lisa said, I called Adrian because someone from TMZ called me to get my opinion about it. And Adrian says, I think to know Russell from the outside, you would never suspect that he would do something like this. So Andy says, a lot of people thought that the show shouldn't have aired. Like, basically the entire show. Because, I mean, I guess it is controversial to be like, hey, here's this man who is dead now, and we're going to basically announce to the world that he's a wife abuser. But I feel like if you're a wife abuser, then the polite societal niceties go out the window for your stupid ass. And I literally don't care. I don't feel the need to speak good about someone who's dead if they did shitty things. You know what I mean? We're not talking about Heinrich Himmler in a positive light just because he's passed away. Like, just because you're dead doesn't absolve you from all the shit that you pulled. You know what I'm saying? We're still going to talk about O.J. Simpson. You know what I'm saying? He's dead. People talk about all kinds of shit of dead people. So I don't feel like that absolves you of anything. Honestly, I think that even more so, we should know more. We should know the truth. So, but a lot of people did think that they were in poor taste. And I would say, air out all the shit that didn't air. Like, for instance, the little segment in the beginning of the season that isn't on Peacock or isn't on anything anymore. Why not? Why would we not get a small segment of all the characters reacting literal days after this news? Why would you take that off? They didn't say anything bad about him. In fact, they were just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm in total shock. He doesn't seem like the type that would do this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't see how that's bad, and I don't see how any of this shit is bad. So he's asking Taylor. She says, at the time, I couldn't even focus on the show. And at that point, it didn't matter to me because I had suffered a tremendous loss, and I was just wondering how it happened. So Andy's kind of asking now, like the rest of the group. Adrian said, I felt it should air because there's a message here to spread awareness about domestic violence and suicide. And to have a show that could take us through everything that they went through, I think it got the message out there. And Camille says, I didn't think the show was air. And that's just how I felt. I just kept thinking about the children. Babe, his children know he's a piece of shit. Because any good dad, I just can't separate good dad from being a wife abuser. Because just speaking about Kennedy, I'm pretty sure he has other children, but speaking about Kennedy, there's no way at someone who's 5 years old, maybe when she was a baby, but at 5 years old, 6 years old, she knows. Do you know what I'm saying? She knows what you're doing to her mother. That's causing her incredible trauma. And any parent, like, there's one thing, like, yes, parents are going to make mistakes, and everybody should probably go to therapy because of shit that your parents did, my son included. I mean, it is what it is. We're all just human. Like, we're all just doing this for the first time, right? Like, but there's a difference between like the normal, maybe I didn't do everything 100% correct, and then causing actual harm and trauma. Because at some point, he was going to move on from Taylor to Kennedy, or at some point, he was going to murder Taylor. Like, there is no other way. And instead of murdering Taylor, he just skipped that part and murdered himself. So I can't say that he was a good father. That's just me. That's my opinion. Okay. These are all my opinions. Everything I say is my opinion. But I feel like if you're causing that much trauma and harm and possible, death to your child's mother, that eliminates you from being a good father. So why not? Like, I would say that the truth needs to be out there, because then so if you can't talk about it and you can't speak about it, that's causing even more trauma, because now Kennedy doesn't feel like she can go turn anywhere. Maybe therapy, yes, but it's like now she has support, love, possibly monetary donations from the whole world cares about her, and she can feel that. She can join groups or lead groups in the future that help people with domestic violence, all because it was put out there. I think that's much better, better for healing, better for processing, better for like a life purpose than hiding it. That's just me. Camille doesn't think that way, and that's fine. And that's her opinion as well. So a viewer question is, Taylor, if you're in an abusive relationship, why would you ever agree to go on a reality TV show? So she answers, and this is also a question that I had. It wasn't so much about the abuse for me. Maybe it was, but I just felt like really in the beginning of this season, the way that she was acting was someone who was very mentally unwell, and I did not think a reality TV show was a safe environment. And now at the end, I realized, okay, the abuse was wrapped up in that, because if it wasn't for abuse, she wouldn't have been so mentally fragile. I just really feel like all of this stuff could have been dealt with for her mental health, for Taylor's mental health off camera. But in the end, it all was okay. But here's her answer, because I do think it's important. She said, at some stage, I believed that the cameras provided me protection, because if we were public figures, the abuse would stop, because he wouldn't have want that aired, or also like the damage to her face. Like, he needed to not, do that to her anymore, because she's got to be on camera and she's got to make appearances, and she's contractually obligated to do certain things. Right. Or it would force us into a divorce. And she was hoping that it would just make a change because they were stuck in an unhealthy relationship. So then Andy asked, why do you think that Russell agreed to do the show? Which is also a really very good question that I was thinking too, because from Taylor's point of view, she wanted the abuse to stop, at least for a time, while she have to be on camera, or they were filming their own lives. And two, it got her money. You know what I mean? Like, it got her a platform where she could have her own money in it, not be associated with Russell. And like the first season, they're not really making that much, but by the second season, they're able to negotiate a contract to make her more money, right? So she could leave. So that's Taylor's motivation. But my thought was like, inconsistently with these husbands who are just huge assholes, I'm always like, how are you agreeing to this? You know what I mean? So she says, I want to say that this was the love of my life and I miss him terribly, but at the same time, he had a very strange personality in that he was a narcissist. Well, no shit. This is like, obviously. And so she says, he would tell me all the time about how much people loved him and adored him. And I don't know if it was mental illness that was forming, where he was up and down all the time. And Andy says, what do you think would have happened if you didn't do the show? And Taylor says, I don't know. But most typically, these types of relationships end in a murder-suicide. So Adrian says, I think the show saved your life. And Andy was like, how? And Adrian says, because at some point, it might have been you. I was always telling her to leave, or that someone is going to be 6 feet under. Oh God, that's and Adrian knows them well. Like they've known each other for a long time. So I just want to touch back on the why did Russell do the show? Well, to feed his own narcissism. He thought that he was going to be like this. He just thinks everybody loves him. The comparison to Donald Trump is like crazy to me because it's like these people who are narcissists, they cannot fathom that people don't like them. It's like, what do you mean I didn't win a Nobel Peace Prize? It's like it just can't compute in their head. And that's the thing for Russell. It's like he just went on the show because he's like, yeah, of course, I'm gonna be the most popular husband ever. When it was really like low key Mo, who's hot, like that helps. But it's like he just is like so in love with Kyle that everybody loved him. But also Bobby, who is one of the best house husbands ever, right? He is just like so in love with Jill. He is such a good husband. He supports her like literally in everything that she wants, gives her good advice, but then also just like backs off and lets her do what she wants. That's the sign of a good house husband. Mauricio is the same way. Like Kyle went and ruined his relationship with Kelsey, and he just had to kind of take it on the chin, and he did because he loves his wife. Russell thought everybody was going to love him just because he's ugly. He's ugly and he's from Texas. Like, no, baby, that's not how it works. You have to have some like redeeming qualities. I don't know, but it does answer some questions. And so moving forward, I guess when we meet these husbands or we're around these men who you're kind of like, ugh, they're probably just narcissists. So we go to commercial break and then we come back and Andy's like, well, this season started with Taylor as she was determined to start a path of self-discovery as she struggled with her marriage and making sense out of her life. Little did she know just how difficult this world would be. So we show basically a clip package of Taylor throughout the whole season. All of the women are having a hard time watching it because it's very clear that Taylor was going through it. And Andy says, it's clear that you were in a lot of pain. What is it like watching that now? And Taylor says, scary to see what it's like to see someone pushed completely to the edge. It was sad for me to watch. And Andy turns to Lisa and he's like, it's upsetting for you. And Lisa was like, very much. Just to see the thought of a man hitting a woman, I find it very disturbing. So Andy says, let's talk about the tea party. Camille, you felt that Taylor goaded you that day. And Camille says, yes, absolutely, because she was the one that was saying everyone needs to be honest here. And I said, who needs to be honest? Because I felt like Taylor wasn't being honest. So I looked at her and I said, do you want me to be honest? And she said, yes. And Andy says, so then why were you surprised talking to Taylor? And Taylor says, because I thought she was going to be honest about what she told me about Lisa Vanderput, basically, not what I told her in private prior to filming. And Camille was like, well, I didn't think it was really that private because you told all of us, and you don't go on a reality TV show if that's happening in your private life. So I would think about that. And I don't appreciate you saying that because everyone knew, but you tagged me in it and I'm the one that was affected by it. And Andy says, so what Camille is saying is like, it's not fair. You're making me out to be like I'm the one that ruined your life and by exposing this when you were literally telling everybody. And they have said that they heard rumors. So it's not only that she was telling the cast, she was telling other people in Beverly Hills were talking about it, but it's also like even the side characters knew about it. Like she wasn't just telling like the main cast, she was telling everybody. They all knew about it. Everybody was talking about it. Camille was just like the only one to say it on camera. And she's basically saying like, don't talk shit about me because, basically you're the one that was telling everyone, not me. And so then we go into another direction. And Andy said, did you ladies doubt at all about what you were hearing was going on? And Camille says, obviously I said it on air. Yes, I did. I was confused by it because in one moment she was telling me the story and it was sad and horrific to hear. And I'm sorry that you had to go through any of that. But then on the other hand, she wants us all to like him. And it was just confusing. And Lisa says, you would often say, it's really bad, the abuse, but then it would get better. And you would be like, tell me, oh, you got to like him. And I was like, I can't like this man. But a lot of women stay for a reason. They stay because they hope it's the last time, because maybe the alternative is scary, and because, you don't have any, you don't own anything, you don't have anything. And I just want to point out, here Lisa is supporting Taylor when none of the other women are supporting her. And I feel like Adrienne should be the one in that role supporting Taylor, because, again, Adrienne is close friends with her. She's not. She's the one saying, why didn't you leave him? I thought someone was going to get killed. Adrienne just looks like an asshole, and Lisa looks like an angel. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, I can't make it any clearer. I don't know how to explain it in any better way. That Lisa is like saying, well, she's acting like she knows so much about, I mean, maybe she does, I don't know. But she's just like, well, of course women stay. Of course that's a normal thing for them to give you two sides of a story. And she's just like, they're supporting Taylor, whereas all the other women are questioning it. And I'm not saying that they're wrong for questioning it, because it's confusing. And I think the other part of it that they can't talk about because they're on a TV show is that they don't want to say anything bad about somebody on a TV show. Like this very serious allegation. They're like kind of like deers in the headlights. So, but of course Camille is not scared of it, and Lisa is not really scared of it. Now, she's not talking bad about Russell, but she's kind of defending Taylor, right? So Andy asks, well, did any of you witness the abuse? And Lisa says, I saw an incredibly abusive text. It was so vile and egregious. He asked, was it threatening? And she said, it was aggressive, everything exploitive. It was something that not a man that loves you writes to your wife. I was shocked. So then he asked, well, what did it say? And then Taylor just gives her like a sad smile, and she's just like, it's okay. It's all out anyway. So Lisa says, well, he called her an effing whore to start off with, a piece of shit. A lot of that type of terminology. It was quite a long text, and she sat there reading it, crying. This was her birthday, by the way, when they were in Vegas. And I knew any man that spoke to his wife like that was not a normal relationship and not someone I want to be a part of. And Andy wrote, first of all, Taylor wrote a book that's going to come up. She wrote, Taylor, you wrote a book that goes into details about your relationship with Russell. You said after his suicide, in some ways you missed the control and abuse. What do you mean by that? And Taylor said, some days I would wake up and think, am I supposed to be doing this and that? Because I'm so used to having him tell me what I can and can't do. And it's just a very hard thing for people to understand. But when you're so used to it, all of a sudden you feel like you're just dangling there, and I'm not able to make my own decisions. It's hard. And I think that's like very much like, people that are in prison for a long time and then they are let out. It's like Shawshank Redemption, if you've ever seen that, where that one guy was let out of prison and then he committed suicide because he just like couldn't get used to life where he had to make his own decisions. And I think that's kind of what she's speaking to here. Camille says, I understand part of that. Yes. And Andy said, are you saying that you were in a somewhat an abusive relationship yourself? And Camille here is speaking about Kelsey, and she said, not physically, but when you're constantly criticized for little things, laughing too much or not enough. And Taylor's like, yeah, you talk to my client too much. So then the next time you were rude because you didn't talk to my client enough, and then you don't know what to do anymore. And after a while, you end up being like Stepford wife. And a lot of women experiencing this, the pounding emotional abuse to your self-esteem. And I would just say, you know what, just hit me just to get over with, because I knew that would end like the emotional and verbal abuse as well. Oh my God. Camille says that's so sad. So I think it's very interesting that Camille is saying that she also experienced this type of like abuse, emotional abuse in her relationship. Like essentially with these, and Kelsey is very clearly a narcissist as well. And I feel like for a lot of these people to get into a certain level of their industries, whether it's acting, whether it's CEOs, there is a lot of, psychopath like tendencies. I don't know. I can't think of the word. Psychopathic tendencies and narcissism, because you have to be okay with stepping over people or maybe doing something unethical to get where you are. Nobody just arrives. There's a lot of like nepotism and there's a lot of like old money that gets you those places. Yes, I understand that. But somebody can be old money, like look at Anderson Cooper. Someone can be old money and still be a kind individual. You know what I'm saying? Um, and somebody can be good at things, but I'm just saying that I'm not saying every CEO is an abuser, but I'm just saying like somebody who gets to the top of their game, they're going to have there could possibly be some kind of tendencies that linger towards abuse. And, at some point you don't know which way to turn, because if you do this one thing and they yell at you, you do the opposite and they yell at you, and it's like, well, I don't know where to go. And they do that on purpose to keep you, on your toes, right? The dichotomy is like just so different because I just like I have never experienced that. And maybe because I'm just like have such a strong personality that I would not put up with anything like that. I'd be like, no, you know what I mean? And that's the thing is like, if you've never been in a relationship like that, maybe you don't understand it and I think that's what Taylor's point was to like Adrian, like, you can't understand this because you're so strong. And yeah, it's like, I actually can't understand it either. Like, I get it, but I'll never feel that way. But I have, sympathy, and I can feel empathetic to those situations. It's just so sad. The whole thing is so sad. But again, I don't know if I ever gave, before this aired, I don't think I ever gave this 10-second thought. You know what I mean? It never really occurred to me to think about it. And now I'm thinking about it a lot. And I think that's important. It's important. It was kind of like the point I was trying to make at the beginning of the show. Okay, so we still have a lot to go. So let's get back into it. So Andy says, a key turning point for the group was when Russell sent a threatening email to Camille, threatening to sue her. So, audience question, do the other women think Taylor knew about the email before Russell sent it? And Adrian very quickly jumps in and says, I do think she knew, and let me tell you why. Brandy had spoke to me the day before that email was sent, and she said she ran into Russell, and Russell said that him and Taylor sat down and wrote the email together. And Camille says, Brandy told me the same thing. So Adrian says, so that was the reason possibly she knew about it, but out of fear, she just went along with it. And, you appeased him all the time to keep peace. And Taylor's like, I did appease him to keep the peace. However, I did not know the content of that email. He and I weren't even speaking when he sent the email. He sent it when I was in Vegas with Lisa. And the night before, I had turned 40. And he said, happy birthday, asshole. Fuck you, you psychotic bitch. So I screenshotted that and texted it to my shrink and said, it's midnight on my 40th birthday. We just had got home from your fashion show. And that's the word he texted me. And then the next day I got on the plane with Lisa and I had misplaced my cell phone for a bit. He couldn't get a hold of me and he was enraged. And by the next day I had got home, he had sent that email. But also, he sent her that text that Lisa had talked about while they were in Vegas. So I think basically she probably just wasn't responding to him. It's like, I don't know why she has to be like, well, I lost my cell phone. It's like, I put my cell phone away so this evil man couldn't get a hold of me for 24 hours. And I'm sure that wherever her kid was probably okay, And I was thinking like, oh, you didn't know anything about what your kid was doing. But then I have to think about like, 15 years ago where we weren't carrying, or I guess it was longer than that, but in the 1900s when people weren't carrying cell phones all the time and people would go away for weekends and, you'd have to call the hotel if you wanted to get a hold of them. And we all need to start just like maybe remembering that, like you don't have to be available 1000% of the time, but that's another, anyway. So she's saying, basically what she's saying is, that after the fashion show, for some reason, they got into a huge fight. And then the next day, she went to Vegas with Lisa. And by the time she got back and they were able to talk again, he had already sent the email. So Andy asked, this is the version of events that you thought happened. And Camille said, I received the email the night of Pandora's bachelorette party because we were all in Vegas. So she got the email where she was also in Vegas, but with Adrian. And I thought that Taylor must have gone home and talked to Russell and told him what had happened for me to get this email. And so Andy says, do you think Taylor put you in a dangerous position by telling Russell what you said? Camille says, of course. I felt that, but after the fact, I do realize that you were scared, and understandably so. So then Andy says, Lisa and Kyle, you are strong women and married. How does hearing this make you feel? For some reason, Adrian answers. No, maybe Lisa answers. Yeah, probably Lisa. So Lisa says, to hear her stories was difficult and sad because I knew she didn't have the kind of strength that I had. And Kyle said, I used to think that if it were me, I would just leave. But you can't judge. You can't say anything unless you've walked in her shoes. And I think this is kind of where all the women sit, and Kyle is just able to verbalize it well, is like they were judging her and questioning her before, but now they get it. And I think that's important. And this is also why I'm like reserving, and I'm not going so hard on the women to be like, I can't believe you didn't believe her, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like they were put in like a hard place differently than just say if it was just like regular people, because they're on TV, and I think they were put in a hard place, like by not wanting to be put in a position where they're, legally liable for saying negative things about someone on camera, as Camille then was. But I think they also were just in the belief of the time where even now people are like, always believe women. Even now people are pushing back on when women come out and say something against a celebrity, and that people are like, and it's like, no, we need to believe women. Like, we're still fighting against that. And I'm not going to fault the women for having like an immediate reaction of, no, that can't be true, because now they get it. Now as it was airing, now that they're seeing, now that they're learning about actual abuse, they get it. And so good for them. Camille says, it almost seems like that was the tipping point to say that I need to make a change and really really leave him. It's frustrating when you see your friend go through something so horrible. And I also felt like she was in love with him. So what Camille is saying is like, Russell sending her that email was the tipping point for Taylor to realize it's gone too far. Okay. Go to commercial break and we come back, and now we're going to talk about something else. So we're going to leave the Taylor discussion for the next episode. So, okay, sorry. I had a little bit of technical difficulties there. Probably because this episode is quite long. So we still have a little bit more to go. All right. So we go to commercial break. We're going to leave Taylor. We go to commercial break. We're going to come back. And Andy says, although there was heat between Lisa and Adrian, a more surprising fact was that the fuel was added to the fire by an unexpected source. So then we see a whole montage of Bernie talking shit about Lisa. And Andy asks Lisa, what did you think when you heard Bernie's feelings about you? And Lisa's like, I don't know him, to be honest. I don't know where all this came from. So Andy's like, well, did you offend his food? And Lisa's like, I have never spoken to him about his food. And Andy was like, you weren't aware he had strong feelings about you? No, until I saw the first episode, and then I was insulted. And I couldn't understand how Adrian would let somebody work for her that is publicly trashing someone who is supposed to be a friend of hers. Because if I had somebody who worked for me, I wouldn't dream of letting them trash one of my friends, especially in public. And I have no recollection of anything with him. I've been to her house for dinner like once or twice, and a couple of parties. And Adrian's like, you've been to parties, he's cooked, and you commented on his food, and other people told me, and it was not nice what you said. I mean, to that I say, okay. Like, does that allow him to trash her? And Lisa's like, I've never talked about any of his food. So Andy's like, well, what was said? And Adrian says, she said, I can't believe he cooks Mexican. What do you mean? Everybody cooks Mexican. It's like the easiest food to cook. Mexican and spaghetti. I mean, that's basically the only thing I cook over my house. White people taco night and spaghetti. She said, I can't believe he cooks Mexican. It's so ethnic, and his food was dry. And Lisa is like incensed because there's like some racial undertones with that. And you know what? If somebody said that shit about me, I'd be mad too, because if they're like, you're saying that he shouldn't be cooking Mexican food for some reason, yeah, I'm gonna be pissed. And so she's like, I'm not taking those lies. And Adrian says, she's like, I'm not taking those lies, Adrian. You know that. And Adrian's like, I'm not saying that you said that. I'm telling you what was told to me. I wasn't there. Then if you then why did you say it? Because that's exactly what you're doing. You're saying she said that. It doesn't matter if you were there or not. You just said she said that. This is where Adrian gets dog walked. If you were waiting for that, it's this. So Andy was like, so what? She's like offended about a member of your staff like talking poorly about one of your friends. And Adrian's like, and I understand that. Of course, I wouldn't like that either. However, I was unaware of what was going on. I'm upstairs getting ready. I'm not in the kitchen. Okay, and that could be true, but if that was the case, then that's what you should have opened with, and not, well, you said his food was dry and you can't believe he cooked Mexican food. Like, no, babe. Your first thing would have been like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know he was saying that. Clearly he's never said any of those things about around me. And we've had a discussion with it, and he's agreed. Like, I don't think he should be fired for not liking Lisa Vanderpump, but like there should definitely have been a conversation. Like, he's agreed that he's not going to talk about any of my friends anymore. And for the record, we don't see this man ever again. I don't think, I mean, maybe. So Lisa said, well, he's never said anything to you. And Adrian says, after I saw what he said, I started asking him what was wrong. And he started telling me what you said at parties. Lisa's like, I've never talked to him at parties. And I know he's a friend of Cedric since that. So basically it's Cedric. Cedric is the common denominator in all this stuff, which gives you so much clarity on why she was hesitant to be friends with Brandy. If Cedric is just going around, because here's the thing, Cedric was probably friends with Bernie, and he was probably like, well, Lisa said your food was dry. Whatever is like the most insulting thing you can say to a chef. And that's probably where this stems from. Lisa probably never said any of that. And so Andy's like, well, it's not talking to him. She's saying you said that to other people and he heard. And Lisa's like, Andy, I would never say any of that. And Adrian said, I investigated, and there were people that were there saying you said that. You investigated? So you investigated this, but you couldn't do your due diligence with fucking Russell? Like, give me a break. I was just like, what did you investigate? Like, please. Okay. So Lisa said, I would never say that no matter what he served. I've been to a couple of parties, a Christmas party, and he sold a story to the tabloids saying that I came over to her house and screamed that all the food was gone. Adrian says, I find that difficult to believe. So Andy goes, do you value your employees? And she starts to say yes. He's like, do you value your employees? And she's like, yes. But he finishes and he's like, more than your friends. And Adrian was just like, that's rude, Andy. Adrian's like, I value both of them. He has opinion and you have your opinion. And Lisa's like, you know what? I agree with you. It's fine for him to make comments about your friends and to sell stories. And Adrian's like, no, so you've never sold a story? Lisa's like, no, I never told a story. Have I talked to Radar Online? Yes. So then Adrian's like, so you sold a story. And Lisa's like, sold a story? I've said you can have the story and you give me a check on my children's lives, on my life. No, absolutely not. So Adrian's like, I agree with you. And Lisa's like, you think that they've given me a check? And Adrian says, I know one person who told me you sold them a story. And so Lisa's like, oh, please, I've never sold a story in my life and I won't be accused of that. And Adrian's like, well, I don't believe you. And so Lisa says, I don't like this. I don't like that you're saying that. Adrian's like, I don't believe you. And Lisa goes, I don't need $1,000. Thank you very much. I'd like you to prove that I sold a story. And so Adrian goes, it's more than $1,000. It's more like $25,000. And Lisa's like, for what? Adrian's like, to sell a story. About what? I don't know. I don't sell stories. And Lisa's like, I don't sell stories. Where does this come from? That's slander. I would never tell a story, but you find out. But you know what? I think that's character assassination, which is interesting because slander and character assassinations are like sort of like what we would sue someone for. So if they weren't willing to do about Russell, but they're cool with doing it about Lisa, I don't know. Seems weird. And Adrian says, I just know that certain friends of yours have said, and so Lisa's like, who? Tell me who. And Adrian's like, your friends. Radar Online. And Lisa's like, oh, those are not my friends. And Camille says, well, he did say that. So Lisa's like, say what? And Adrian's like, that you get paid for stories that you leak online. And Camille says, blank. She actually says the name, but we're not putting it on camera. Blank said that, but I think he was just trying to get a story from me and I wouldn't give it to him. And he said, well, Lisa does it all the time. And Lisa says, oh, please, there's no upside for me. I have many people in my restaurant every single day. My restaurant is never in the press. And I'm certainly not going to go to any magazine and say, here's a thing, not for $25,000. And I'm sure that they don't have that kind of money anyways. And I'm sure that's a fucking insult to say that to a friend. And I'm offended by you. I can't even tell you. Such a low blow, character assassination. And I've lost my respect for this situation. So as Lisa's just like going off, because here's the thing, Camille is basically like, yeah, so and so told me that too, but I think he was just telling me that so that I would tell him a story. Like, so she's saying like, I don't think Lisa sold a story. I think this guy is just lying so that we'll all tell him stuff. And as Lisa's going on and on and on and on, Adrian's body language is just like to shrink into herself. She's just like, and Lisa plays this so good because she's playing the victim going on the defensive. And she's so vehement in her opposition to this that she comes out as believable. And Adrian's like, well, one person told me that. Your friend, one person. Okay, we have heard that she's friends with the Us Weekly person, Radar Online. You don't think that these people who live in LA and work in LA don't know people and aren't friends with the LA, you know what I'm saying? Like, and you're telling me that you call up your friend and you just have this little dish of gossip. Somehow it ends up in a magazine. That's not selling a story though. So then Andy goes, you've lost respect for Adrian. And Lisa says, to me, that's upsetting and insulting. So then Adrian's like, I'm sorry. Then Andy goes, can you guys go on from here? And Adrian's like, I would hope so. And Lisa's like, I have to think for a while. And she pauses and she's like, I'm sure we can move on. Masterclass in dog walking, because Adrian really felt like she had something here, because she was like, it started out with her employee taking a shit on Lisa Vanderpump. And Lisa Vanderpump was like, oh, he sold a story about me. And then Adrian's like, well, yeah, bitch, you sell stories. And then Lisa's like, the fuck I do. And she just goes on the attack. Like, Adrian really thought she had her here, and she definitely did not have her at all. Masterclass in Bobby Fischer. I don't know if you know who Bobby Fischer is. Maybe you don't. It's a chess master, okay? I don't know. I don't actually know who Bobby Fischer is. Famous chess master. Couldn't tell you the year. Couldn't tell you anything. Oh, my husband's texting me. No. Okay. All right. So that's that. I just thought this was kind of amazing. Like, Adrian looks so bad. This season for her was so bad. First of all, letting Bernie talk shit about her, about Lisa, unfathomable to me. 2, her actions toward Taylor the whole time, so weird to me. Like, Kyle is being a friend. Kyle is being there for her, helping her pick up the pieces. Adrian's not being her friend. Adrian is trying to like distance herself from this behavior. And a scene that was so strange to me, they had on the like the lost footage episodes that they have after this, was I guess Taylor at some point, maybe in the first season, had kind of mentioned casually that Adrian is Kennedy's godmother. And so at she comes into a confessional and she's like, well, I don't see Adrian as much now because our kids go to different schools. Okay. So then they go to lunch to get coffee or something. And they're like, oh, I wish that our kids go to the same schools. We don't see each other as much. And it's something about Adrian being the godmother of Kennedy. And Adrian's like, no. She's basically, and it's okay. I respect Adrian for saying this, but she's like, you don't understand, like, I don't think you get, like, the severity of that, of, like, I'm going to have to be in her life, her whole life, and, like, teaching her and guiding her. And I feel like people who aren't Catholic don't get, like, the real relationship between godmother, because they're just like, oh, they're the godmother. But it's like a big deal in like religious circles if you are religious. And so Adrian was like, no, it's inappropriate for me to be here. But it was just like so funny. And I have no problem with Adrian saying that, but it's like so funny for her to be like, have this conversation on camera. And she's like, it's inappropriate for you to be telling people that I'm Kennedy's godmother when we don't have that type of relationship. But just like to just not, you can't even pretend that you guys are like BFFs anymore. It's like, that's over. All right, so we just have a little bit more left. I know this episode is so long, but there's just like so much to talk about. So Brandy has joined, and she's now on the end of the couch next to Camille. So Andy says, I understand that congrats and condolences are in order because you got married for a few hours on New Year's Eve. And she was like, yeah, we had a ceremony. It wasn't legal or anything. And so then Andy says, did you hear from your ex about your activities on the show? And she's like, well, I don't speak to him. I only speak to his assistant about our kids, but the kids are great and they're unaffected by it. And we have a good co-parenting relationship in that he doesn't talk shit about me in front of the kids and I do the same thing. Now, here's the thing, but what I tell my friends and that's a totally different situation. So Andy's like, you and Camille immediately bonded because you've both been wronged by famous men. And then Brandy goes, well, yours is famous, mine's not. And so Andy's like, oh, that's funny. And so then Brandy is like, what it did feel like when, or he says, what did it feel like when Adrian brought you to that first event of Kyle's? And Brandy's like, well, it was like a fish out of water. Like they looked at me like I was some kind of a joke and they were going to mistreat me. And it was so silly. They can't take my sense of humor, or they talk behind my back. Like, well, we've all done that. And Kyle goes, wow, right out of the gate, Brandy. And Brandy goes, stop. And that's the end of the episode. So Brandy's coming in to cause havoc for the second episode. But that is that. I don't want to talk much longer. We'll talk about everything in the next couple of episodes because this is already long. Thank you so much for joining me. And we will see you in the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills Season 2 Reunion Part 2 next time. Bye.